out of all of the gym leaders that got cards, clearly Blaine got the best Pokemon. I mean, just in this format, I've already done a video on Blaine's Arcanine and on Blaine's Charizard, both pretty dominant fire types in this format. Even in my most recent video about Jumpluff, I do mention that the biggest thing that was holding it back from being a huge archetype in base Neo was that fire types were everywhere and there was no way to really get around that weakness. There weren't any good water types that you could splash in that had colorless attacks to help coverage. And out of the prevalent fire types, the biggest threat to a grass deck was Turn 2 Blaine's Rapidash. This was a bit of a rogue deck and it did stay around the tier 2 range, but this was a really fun deck and a pretty prominent one at the end of base Neo. Unlike other big fire types, it was completely unaffected by Fossil Muck. Its damage output per energy was much better, and it was a stage 1, so it was much quicker than, say, a Blaine's Charizard deck. Plus, it had free retreat and a weakness that you could easily get rid of. And you're probably wondering why it was Rapidash and not Blaine's Ninetales that became the prominent fire type, because Blaine's Ninetales has an even higher damage output per energy cost, and even has a nifty Pokemon power that has great synergy with the Blaine Trainer card. So if you want to hear more about that, check out my Prop 15 video on Blaine's Ninetales. But the reason that it was not as useful is because it did kind of rely on that Pokemon power to refresh itself, and Fossil Muck was able to shut that down very easily. Also, its burn up attack is going to be discarding energy a lot of the time, and that's just something you could not do in base Neo, where a lot of decks were running 4 copies of energy removal and super energy removal. So even with the help of the Blaine Trainer, sustaining Blaine's Ninetales turn after turn attacking takes a lot of energy, and that you just don't have room for that in a base Neo build. You would have to give so much room to energy retrievals, nightly garbage run, and then a third of your deck's gonna have to be energy, and you could get away with that very easily in Prop 15 when card numbers were limited, but in a format like base Neo, it's just not gonna work. But what does work very well for base Neo is an attack that you can get off for only 1 energy, and an attack that can potentially KO a baby on turn 2. That's enough about fire types. Let's just get into the build. Full playset of Cleffa, of course, just so you can try to start out the game with an Eek. That's very ideal for getting all of the Ponyta onto your bench, and also getting a specific coverage card that comes in very useful. We'll get to that in a bit. One thing I think I should mention in a lot more of these videos is that this Cleffa card is expensive. It's about $10 per Cleffa if you get the Neo Genesis version, but there is a promo version with the exact same attack, exact same usefulness, that's only about $1. So if you do want to build base Neo decks or Neo format decks, don't let the price tag on Cleffa deter you, because there is a cheaper version. We'll also be running a full playset of the Hind Kick Blaine's Ponyta. I prefer this one because it's got 10 more HP, and you're not really going to be using Ponyta to attack that much anyway. Even if you do, you can use Hind Kick off of a double colorless if you're in a bind, and it's a pretty decent attack, but it's mainly just because of that increased HP. And then of course we'll also be running a full playset of Blaine's Rapidash. The intro probably gave this card enough steam that you know why it's good, you know why it's useful. Ideally, you want this card and a double colorless in your hand on turn 2, so you can free retreat out of Cleffa into Blaine's Rapidash and start using Stomp. 30 damage on turn 2 is solid by itself, but you also get a chance for extra damage and spread damage. And then here is that coverage card I was talking about, which is Neo Genesis Pikachu, an underused card, but very useful for this deck because there is that water weakness. So Pikachu is perfect for hitting those water Pokemon for their weakness off of 1 colorless energy. So like Cleffa, you can just slap down a recycle energy on this Pikachu and be good to go. That Pikachu can also be pretty threatening early game, because if you hit your coin flips right, that quick attack can knock out your opponent's Cleffa while they're still trying to get Eeks off. Got your standard 2/2 Oak Elm Professor pairing that you see across all of my videos. Of course, you can adjust those to whichever Professor card you prefer, and Computer Search to help get those cards you need on turn 2 when you need them and really get the jump on your opponent. That's where this deck shines the most, is when you're able to get that Rapidash on turn 2 and just start stomping your opponent. both literally with the attack, but also figuratively as you destroy whatever setup they're trying to get. Aggro decks were not all that common. Aside from Sneasel, you just saw a lot of stall, a lot of setup in this format, and so that's another reason why Rapidash really stands out, is because it could start dealing so much damage on turn 2 and consistently, unlike Sneasel, who could stumble pretty hard if it got hit with too many energy removals. Speaking of which, got some Last in this deck, 3 copies of Last to try to combat those energy removals, since you are going to be a little bit dependent on double colorless early game. That's what's going to help you attack on turn 2, so an early game Last might help you avoid getting those double colorless discarded and making sure you can still attack turn after turn consistently without having to use recycle energies or additional fire energies just to use Stomp. But because Blaine's Rapidash does have an attack for only 1 energy that still does pretty good damage, super energy removal is also going to be very useful in this deck situationally, which is why I only include 2 copies of this, because Rapidash also has free retreat. You can just put one in the active position just so you can discard a recycle energy or a fire energy for super energy removal, and then just bring it right back to the bench safely to swap out with another Pokemon. I also only have 2 copies of Focus Band in this deck because those are going to be more for Cleffa and Pikachu, while the Rapidash benefits a lot more from Goldberry. It's got 70 HP, it's right in that great zone to where it can benefit from Goldberry more than it can from Focus Band, because it's not really going to be looking out for Okos with 70 HP. Not a lot of decks are going to be able to deal 70 damage, and so that's where you want to be able to deal with chip damage a little more, or even chunk of damage with Goldberry, and then Double Gust 2 is going to be very beneficial for you because Rapidash has free retreat, Cleffa has free retreat, and so you're not going to be worrying too much about how your bench is being moved around. But you can hurt your opponent a lot if they do have Pokemon that can't retreat for free and you stranded them in the active position while you use Stomp over and over again and potentially deal some spread damage to their bench as well, which is going to be pretty scary since your opponent's going to have at least 1 baby Pokemon on their bench probably. I think I said it in the last video too, but the more I play this format, the more I realize most decks really do need 2 copies of Nightly Garbage Run, since games tend to go a lot longer, and then also 2 copies of Cinnabar City Gym, which is going to help you get rid of that water weakness. I know Pikachu's already in here as coverage, but just to have that stadium card in here to help as well. It also works as a counter stadium, so you can get rid of some problematic stadiums that your opponent plays as well. Potentially you could run 3 copies. I found that was a little too much. Like, I would end up with just 1 sitting in my hand for half the game, and so I opted for only 2. If you really need a Cinnabar City Gym, you can always computer search or item finder to get it back. Recycle energy really comes in handy late game after a lot of your fire energies have already ended up in the discard pile, and you've already burned through all your double colorless, so you can't really research them out. But that's also another place where Pikachu can come in really handy, is if you're low on fire energy because this deck's only running 12 of them, only 12 fire energy, but you still have full playsets of double colorless and recycle. And so if you're having a hard time, you can't pull that Nightly Garbage Run you need to get the fire energy back in your deck, you can just free retreat into Pikachu and start using Quick Attack over and over again. A Pikachu with a Focus Band on it is going to last a lot longer than you think and deal more damage than you probably think, unless you're just really bad at coin flips, like I am. But generally speaking, this deck is pretty straightforward, and this is a loose build, so you can tinker around a bit with the card numbers and the layouts. For instance, you could completely take out those Pikachu if they're not all that useful to you, and just put in something like Tyrogue. That would easily threaten babies just as much as Pikachu would, and it's also got the baby effect on it, so it will last longer even without the Focus Band. But the Pikachu is a fun card that I like to use. You could even substitute it out for Pichu, and it would be a great addition because Pichu's Zap Attack is going to be dealing damage to Pokemon that have Pokemon powers only. Or you could include Pichu and Pikachu and just use Pikachu as an evolution card. Oh man, am I rethinking the structure of this deck that I've already video recorded? Huh. But no, I did playtest this enough to where I think this is a very solid build of this deck. So there you have it, turn 2 Blaine's Rapidash. You're probably already thinking, why is it Blaine in this deck? It would work perfectly for the turn 2 synergy, meaning that you could have 3 fire energy on that Rapidash and not really worry about your double colorless getting discarded. Well, the reason for that is because I only run 12 fire energy in this deck, so having 2 of them in your hand is pretty unlikely. When I tried a version of this build with Blaine, I almost never got to utilize it fully, but that's also because I wanted to include Pikachu in this deck, meaning that I kept a full playset of Recycle Energy. If you take out that playset of Recycle Energy, like if you don't want to use Pikachu, then yes, including 4 more Fire Energy and probably a full playset of Blaine would really help this deck if you're wanting to go complete focus on Rapidash, complete Fire, turn 2 Stomp. And if you're doing that type of build, I would almost recommend running a 3rd copy of Nightly Garbage Run just to make sure you have a way to consistently get those Fire Energy back. And I already mentioned Pichu as a great Pikachu replacement in this deck. If you take out the 2 Pikachu in favor of 2 Pichu, I would say also reduce your count of Cleffa down to 3. That way you have 5 baby Pokemon you can rely on, and you still will probably get an opening Cleffa if you need it. One of the strong points of this deck is that it's immune to Muck, so if you do want to run a more defensive control version of Blaine's Rapidash, why not include a 2-2 line of Muck? That way you can mess with your opponents in the same kind of ways that you're unaffected by. Muck isn't going to help you with tier 1 decks like Sneasel, Chansey, or Steelix, but it is going to help you tremendously with tier 2 decks, which the majority of rely on Pokemon powers and really have no defense against Muck other than knocking out a Grimer as quickly as possible. Blaine's Rapidash is a pretty versatile fire type, so let me know down in the comments how you would run this deck. What do you think would pair really well with Blaine's Rapidash? There's probably something that I didn't think of whenever I was building my playtest version of this deck. Also, let me know what decks you would like to see in the future. Got a lot of theme decks, a lot of request decks that I will be playtesting and working through soon. If you want to see the playtesting process and maybe get some hints on what videos are coming up next, follow me on Instagram at DrunkShuckle. Let me know if you're excited for that Galarian Rapidash. Until next video, bye-bye!